Recently, President-elect Trump announced that Pete Hegseth was his pick to be Secretary of Defense, in addition to being a Fox News host. He is also a Princeton University graduate, has a master's of public policy from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and is a decorated combat veteran and platoon leader, having served in Iraq and Afghanistan. However, his confirmation remains uncertain after accusations of sexual assault have been made public, as well as reports about questionable behavior while he led two nonprofits serving veterans. But his nomination has sparked a conversation about who should lead the Department of Defense: a high-profile executive or a high-ranking military official with traditional large-scale leadership training, or a veteran with combat experience that understands the actual issues facing men and women in the armed services. Whether or not Hegseth ultimately gets confirmed remains to be seen. But what type of experience do you think ultimately would best equip the next Secretary of Defense?
It's a really good question. And I've heard a lot of components and arguments for him not being qualified to be in that position, not fully understanding what the Secretary of Defense is. I mean, the Secretary of Defense is a civilian position that's basically liaisoning between the military and all of its branches and all the services, and the U.S. government, the executive branch specifically. So when you look at that position, it's a civilian position. And then, like you said, the question is, do you want it to be a general or do you want it to be a high-ranking executive? And the problem with that, and the reason why these cabinet members are semi-controversial to very controversial, is because they're not bureaucrats. They're not people who grew up in the system who are doing and executing the same protocols, dealing with issues the same way. For example, rooting out the deep state, or rooting out corruption, or rooting out activists that are more concerned about their political ideology than they are doing the job. So one, he's a Harvard grad. He got his master's from Harvard, but he also did ROTC.
Yep.
What was it?
Princeton as well. Princeton University graduate.
His master's degree. Yeah.
Master's from Harvard.
Yep. He got his, so he's Ivy League academic degrees, but it's like, set that aside, right? He went to ROTC. When nobody was paying attention, like he was just nobody, he was just a guy who graduated college, did ROTC. His first combat rotation, I believe, was in Samara. So he did Iraq, Afghanistan, and then a stint in Guantanamo. But I know a guy who was with him when he showed up as a platoon leader in Samara and said he was one of the best platoon leaders he's ever had. And so he was a young junior commissioned officer, worked his way through the ranks, finished 20 years of service in the National Guard, and then he did a whole bunch of other stuff. Like, I don't know, he was a really good author. He wrote a book specifically discussing the problems that warriors have with all the politics involved in the military. So I think it's called the War on Warriors. He also has a nonprofit that's helping veterans. And so when you look at the totality of his experiences, even as a Fox News analyst, or somebody who was on Fox and Friends, as people from the left say, like he's just a host on Fox and Friends. It's like, no, he has a really profound military experience, working at the tactical level, seeing what the guys go through because he was on the ground, and then worked his way up through the ranks. I think he retired as a major. Yep. And then when you take that, it's like, that's the guy I want. I don't want a general that got his first star 20 years ago. That, the last time he saw a tactical operation was Bosnia. Like, I want a guy who actually has been on the ground, understands the complexity of physical warfare, and then is a civilian, a true civilian who's been out of the military for a period of time and not worked through the bureaucracy of 1 through 4 stars. That's my position on it. I think he's going to be good for it. And I think it's like when you hire a consultant. You don't hire a consultant from somebody who's worked in the same specific type of structure that your business is in. You want an outside perspective. You want somebody who's not from a parallel existence. You want somebody outside the box that comes in and sees things in a different optic. That's what the Department of Defense needs. He spoke about especially woke ideology in the military. I think it could be summed up with political activism is what you have, and it's
Yeah.
like that's no place in the military. So I think it's a good thing personally, and I think he will get confirmed, despite some of the issues that he's facing.
Yeah. It's interesting. You brought up the Fox and Friends. As soon as the announcement was made, a large segment of people just exploded with, oh, now you're going to have a TV news personality running the Department of Defense, and ignored everything else in his life that he had done up to and including the military experience. And a lot of people have said, he's just not qualified. And my question to that and my pushback on that is, can you show me where the qualifications are that are required to be the Secretary of Defense? Most of the time, yes, it is a senior ranking military officer. And I don't know your personal experience, but mine is that there are fantastic flag officers. And then there are flag officers that are like a fucking turd in a toilet bowl that refuse to go down, even when you flush it. And so they wear the same uniform. And it's very hard for people in the civilian world who have never been in the military to separate the wheat from the chaff on that one. But somebody who has been in the military, immediately when somebody is clued into the machine and how the sausage is made. And somebody, like you said, who has been detached from an operational environment for 10, 20, 30 years. They got all the shiny objects on their military uniform, but they don't necessarily anymore serve to function in a role that can direct the military towards where the military may be aiming, a revolution in tactics, training, equipment, battle space, whatever it may be. Um, and since nobody can point to me towards these are the minimum requirements to be the Secretary of Defense, I personally, as somebody who spent 17 years in the military, am very interested to see what it would be like to have somebody who's now in their early 40s, as opposed to much later in their life, sitting in that role, who has a closer touch point to military service than a lot of these other people have. I don't think rank is a requirement to hold that role. And again, I don't know about you, the best leaders that I ever worked for, and I'll use a commanding officer as an example. They were the senior person at a SEAL team. The best ones that I ever worked with were the ones who never tried to be the smartest person in the room. They tried to staff their deficiencies, and that's why they had N1 in the Navy, at least N1 through N9, and the joint world, it's J1 through J9, and who knows what the Army is, whatever code you guys use. But they would bring in the best subject matter experts from those positions, solicit for feedback, solicit for guidance, take that on board, and then make that decision. So, yeah, he may not be the most experienced military officer in the world, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Because as long as he can hold that role and looking at it from a leadership perspective and not try to be the smartest person in the room and staff those people that are going to be reporting to him with the smartest people in the room and take that on board. I mean, I honestly think that the military needs a shot in the arm like that. It needs to have a little bit of CPR put onto it. My own personal opinion is there have been a lot of social experiments that have been injected into the military, and the fact that we're probably less than 5 years away from needing to implement a draft because recruitment numbers are so low, I think those inputs inform those outputs. I think changes need to be made, and the military needs to go back to being focused on lethality absent social experiments. And I think that's going to take a changing of the guard.
Agreed.
Yeah, and then the sexual assault stuff. I mean, I'm pretty sure I can speak for you on this one. How about we let the system play itself out? How about when people are accused of something, if there is a system in place, an investigation in place, before jumping to judgment, let's let those things play out. And the result is the result. And I see this so often. If the result aligns with what people believe, they have no problem with the system. If the result does not align with their core beliefs, they will say the system is flawed. It's like, the system isn't flawed. You have an issue with the outcome. It's the same thing when people go to jury trials. I cannot believe they were found innocent. The court is flawed. And if I ask them, well, if the net result had been they were guilty, would you accept it? They're like, yes, of course. I'm like, okay, your issue isn't with the system. Your issue is with the outcome, and you need to deal with that as an individual. So when I hear things like, issues with nonprofits serving veterans or accusations of sexual assault, like an accusation of sexual assault is one thing. An investigation and a conviction on sexual assault is something else. I don't condone sexual assault in any way, shape, and form, but I am not going to jump on somebody's head just because an accusation is made. I'm going to allow an investigation to play itself out. And if it goes to a court of law, I'm going to allow that system to play itself out before I render any judgment.
Yeah, there was, the accusation that was made very specifically was investigated by detectives from the police department, and they found no crime committed. And then the complication is later down the road, when he became popular, and this is typically how it works, that person said, civilly, I'm going to sue you. And if you don't give me money outside of the court, then I'm going to propose a lawsuit. And so he settled out of court because the alternative is he would spend a lot of money and resources and time invested in that civil component. So the end result was there was no criminal charge because the investigators found no criminal wrongdoing, and he paid an undisclosed amount to settle out of court based on a civil complication only when he became more popular. And so my thing is, like, again, like, if you're going to sit here and say this person doesn't deserve to be in this position because they were convicted of a crime, I understand, and I could weigh that. But if we're just talking about accusations, how many people have accusations from anything, and what does that hold weight to? Because it's an accusation. It's not a conviction. So I think it's just more propaganda that the media is putting out. I mean, it was the New Yorker put out a really disgusting article with a whole bunch of information that was just accusations and hearsay, nothing of substance. And I'm like, they're just trying to slander his name so they could push him out. And then it's like, who do you want? Do you want a 4-star general like Lloyd Austin, who's completely worthless, who literally disappears and goes AWOL for 4 days, despite my empathy for him because he's fighting prostate cancer, but disappears for 4 days? The president doesn't know where he is, and neither does his own staff. It's like, that's the level of competence that we're dealing with a military that's demoralized and more ineffective than it's ever been in the history of warfare. It's called the War Department. That was Hegseth's big thing. He wants it to be a War Department, not to be a political, platform for your ideology.
You think he'll get approved? His nomination will go through?
I think they will do whatever it takes to get confirmed. And I think at this point, anybody that is going to the hearing, the actual confirmation hearing, is going to get approved. I think he will. I think there's going to be a tough line of questioning. No Democrats will vote for him, but that's okay as long as all the Republicans do. I think he would have to lose 3 in order for him not to be confirmed. And I think they would go into that unilaterally on the same sheet of music, and I think he'll get through. I don't think it'll be easy, but confirmations aren't intended to be easy. They're intended to be a dog and pony show for political banter, but they already know what's going to happen, and I think they already know that he's going to get through.
Yeah, I think he's going to get through as well. And honestly, I'm looking forward to see, like I said, a fresh shot in the arm from somebody in that role, a more junior position, a little bit more of a diverse background, a younger person. I'm interested to see what kind of impact they can make. I think, honestly, I truly believe that if we can reorient the narrative around what military service is and bring some pride back into actually being issued your fucking flag on your uniform, which is such a rarefied thing. People can go buy it wherever they want to, but the ability to have it issued and to be able to wear it, in the service of your country, I think is an amazing thing. I think we've lost that messaging. I think we've lost a lot of that pride. And I'm hopeful that some fresh blood can actually help with that, because I think it'll solve a lot of the recruiting issues.
Same. It's going to be an interesting show for sure.